Hello, everybody. I'm Aaron Simmons, and this is Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves, April 2nd, 2020. A few years ago, I gave a talk to a business magazine event, and they were celebrating the work of all these young business leaders and community leaders. And I was invited to come inspire them and say something that was meaningful to them at that time and celebrate their accomplishments. And what I did was actually encourage them not to confuse business with busyness, not to confuse doing things that matter with simply making sure that you always have something to do. And the reason that I thought this was necessary for them to hear is because too often we live in a world where people think they are better than others because they are busier than them. My own students tend to jockey for position at the level of who has the most commitments, who has the least time, who is the most exhausted. And these are really disastrous ways of relating to the human condition and the business that we must do as members of a social world. When I gave that talk, I discovered something really interesting, that the words business and busyness are actually anchored, it seems, in the same root word. An Old English term that is busyness, if I'm pronouncing that right. And what busyness actually meant was simply anxiety. Now, think about that for a minute. That being busy, the thing that we do in order to feel like that we are doing something significant, actually just means to be anxious. Similarly, when we define ourselves by our jobs, we define ourselves by our social activities and social roles, when we are about the business of our daily lives, it's important also not to confuse the business that matters that we do simply with the anxiety of never feeling like we have done enough. I think too often, many of us approach our business this way. The business of our jobs, the business of taking care of our financial responsibilities ends up overriding the business of trying to do what Socrates invited us to so many years ago, simply live well. The Greeks understood that philosophy was not simply a professional business practice, as it were, but philosophy was a way of life. It was a way of inviting ourselves to be intentional and reflective and good at what it is we think is worth doing. So whatever your business, I know some of you are at home wishing you could get to your business. I know others of you have recently lost your jobs, and it's heartbreaking because of where we find ourselves, that we also have this economic stress and anxiety imposed on top of our physical fear about the coronavirus. Others of you continue to do your business, and yet you're doing it now in new ways. And yet that may, in many cases, provide more stress and more anxiety because it feels like you knew how to get this work done where you were. But now getting all that same amount of work done where you are presents new challenges and difficulties. Wherever you are today, we are all in this together. And one of the things we've got to remind ourselves is that we should engage in our business because it matters. We should not try to make our business simply the act of being busy. So if you are getting bored at home, then ask yourself, well, what needs done? What could I do? What business can I engage in to create joy, prosperity, and health for others? If you're at home overwhelmed because of how much you have to do, you could ask yourself, well, how is it then that I can allow myself to focus in on what matters about what I do and avoid the temptation to fall back into the anxiety of simply being busy? At the end of the day, we are all having to find ways to navigate a very different world for a little while. And in this time, may we stay active, may we stay engaged, may we stay productive, but may we not simply give in to the idol of busyness. Today, I wish you well, and tomorrow, I hope to see you again, unless a piano falls on our heads.